Good day, everybody. My name is Katarzyna Marton Gadoś. I'm a teacher of economics at Lazarski University. And during this meeting, we will try to create our own living standard index. So it will be a kind of a workshop for you, during which you will understand better, hopefully, how to create a living standard. The outline of our meeting is, first of all, we need to know what the standard living in general is, so few words about this. Then we will get know how we usually measure living standards nowadays. There are several indexes about it. And finally, we will try to create our living standard index on our own. Okay, so let's start with the first question. What is the standard of living in general? If you take into consideration the variety of areas of your life, you realize that your standard of living depends on each of them, actually. If you look at the variety of the goods you use every day, if you think about the standard, the quality, the accessibility of healthcare, if you think about transportation you use every day, if you think about your education, nutrition, recreation, information that you have to your disposal, and many other areas, you start to realize what the standard of living is. And now let's make a little case. Please try to imagine and try to compare the standard of living of you and your grandparents. Look at this variety of areas. Think about the goods you have and services you have the access to. Think about your grandparents. Do they have the same as you have right now? Do they have the accessibility to many areas of this presented here, or not so much? I think that you quickly realize that there are great differences. Obviously, sometimes we are nowadays well off of goods, services, different means of transportation, better healthcare, better working condition, but there are still some areas that you can be jealous about, thinking about your grandparents. For example, if you think about the environment. So probably you will realize that nowadays we have a little bit worse condition of the environment that they have. Obviously, everything we need to analyze very carefully, but the general picture is that standard living nowadays is much better than the standard living of your grandparents. Let's try to say openly what does it mean a standard of living. So in economics we say that this is simply the level to which people have the access to the goods and to the services. So the bigger the accessibility of goods and services, the better the lives. Yeah, the goods that we use, the services that we use, they make our lives easier, healthier, safer, and more enjoyable. How to measure living standards? There are plenty of ideas how to do this, but the most popular and the most frequently used index to measure living standards is a gross domestic product. We can try to compare living standards among different countries with this index. GDP, better GDP per capita. But obviously it's not the only possible way to measure living standards. For example, very often used and very often used as a contradictory way of measuring living standards, Human Development Index. Another way, Gini coefficient. One more, poverty rate. Another one, basic services index. One more, employment and wages index. So there are really a lot of ideas how to measure living standards. Obviously, each of these indexes, they have many advantages. They are quite useful in some circumstances, but at the same time, they have a lot of disadvantages. We know many drawbacks, so that's why we are still looking for better and better index that will measure our living standards. And this is the task for us right now. Let's try to build our living standard index on our own. How to do that? First of all, in order to have a nice standard of living index, we need to create a kind of an indicator, a kind of a formula, we can say, that allows us to measure well-being of specific population. For example, women or men in different countries. Then we will have to use the indicator to assess the well-being of these countries. Finally, we will try to rank the countries from the ones with the highest living standards up to the lowest one. So this is our task for now. How can we build a high-quality living standard? What does it mean, equality, in this regard? So your well-being indicator should include several areas important for people, for the population you want to talk about. So in other words, you need to choose several factors that are relevant for the selected group. Later on, each factor you need to accompany with one or more metrics. The more metrics you have in your mind, the better actually. It means that each area of interest of a living area, you need to equipped with some tools that you will use to measure this factor. That's what I mean saying metrics. And finally, we need to select the factors and their corresponding metrics with a very wise way. It cannot be done just by accident. You need to refer constantly to the population that you have chosen. You need to think carefully, are the factors, are the metrics the more representative I can find? Then we can use our indicator and test the countries, the population of the countries, with this index. Let's start our work. Here we have some steps to be followed by us in order to have at the end of the last step a nice living standard index. Step number 1. First of all, we need to select 50 countries from all continents. Please remember that it's not a big deal to measure living standard of people who are living in Europe, for example. It's much more difficult to look for an appropriate index that will be good to measure the standard of living in different countries from all over the world. So we need a lot of countries from all continents. Step number 2. This is the moment when we need to determine main factors that are relevant for the well-being of our selected group of people. We need to think right now carefully what areas of life are important for the selected group of people. what should I think about the lives of these people? So again, you cannot rely only on one factor or two factors, because there are different life areas that are very important for us. For example, education, for example, safety, for example, health, and many, many other factors. This is the moment to decide about the most appropriate for our population. Step number 3. Select metrics that are suitable from the factors that you have chosen just a minute ago. So right now you need to choose indicators, notions that allows you to measure how well off within the factors area different countries are. And step number 4, we need to look for the data. We need to look for the data on the metrics, and please remember that we use only very relevant data sources. For example, you can use the databases of the World Bank, fully accessible, a lot of data here. Okay, if you follow the steps that we have mentioned, you should have in front of your eyes a kind of a spreadsheet. Here you can see a little example of it. Obviously with a very limited number of countries, as you can see. And the metrics that you can observe here, like life expectancy, like infant mortality rate, like access to healthcare, they all refer to our health condition. Yeah? Please remember that this is only example. 3 metrics out of only one factor. Please remember that you need to take into consideration more factors, and each factor should be justified with 3, 4, 5 metrics. Step number 5. Create a formula to calculate your index, your living standard index. Here you have an example, a rough idea what do we mean by index. The most easiest way to create living standard index is just to take into consideration each factor and add to this factor the weight at which we think that people are concerned about this factor. So it's enough to multiply each factor data into the weightings. Please remember that each factor, for example, factor number 1, consists of different metrics, different smaller indicators, like matrix number 1, matrix number 2, matrix number 3, etc. And each factor multiplied into the weight of it should be calculated according to this formula. Matrix number 1 into the weight of it, how important it is in the whole index. Matrix number 2 multiplied into the weight of it, and so on and so forth. So at the end of your calculations, you will have a nice living standard index that consists of particular factor areas, particular metrics, and the weightings for this metrics. Step number 6. Please organize your spreadsheet with the data within the different metrics that you have chosen, with the formula for your index. And step number 7, rank your countries according to a living standard level. Start from those which have the highest living standard, please have at the bottom of the list the countries with the lowest living standard. So this is the easiest way how you should approach the topic of creating your own living standard. Good luck. Thank you.